Welcome Formula One fans, and here we are again back with the Formula One News Hour, and Jonathan Steele, your host. Sorry it's been a few weeks since our last post, but it's been busy times here at the Steele household. As many of you know or may not know, this is swim season, and I have twins that swim for their college, Kenyon College, up in Ohio, and I'm happy to say that Kenyon is on its way to the national championships, the NCAA national championships. And this year, my son made it as a team member. My daughter did not. Last year, my son missed out because he had broken his ankle at winter training in Florida and didn't recover in time to make the NCAAs. But my daughter did, and of course, they not only won the NCAC conference championships, but they won the NCAA national championships. So we're hoping this year my son can manage to do what my daughter did last year and enjoy a victory in the NCAAs. They did win the NCAC conference championships a couple of weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago now, which I'm happy to say we were there and had a great 3, 4 days, 5 days, I guess, watching my twins swim. Their college career and their swimming career is coming to an end this year, so not only happy times but sad times, as I won't be going to any more swim meets and being a timer and all those other things. So I'm going to start off this news hour by explaining a couple of things. We will throughout the season, and good news, folks, the season starts next weekend, March 4th and March 3rd and 4th, or 4th and 5th, and the first Grand Prix of the year coming from Bahrain. So looking forward to that, and as we did last year, we will start each weekend with a history section, and then the free time trials on Saturday, and then the race on Sunday. Most of the races are early in the morning, but we do have some at night time and some in the middle of the night, and a few in the afternoon, just depending, like right here in the United States. And this year in the United States, we in fact have 3. The first one will be in Miami in May. Got my months mixed up there, and then of course right here in Austin in October, and right after that in Las Vegas. So an exciting time for Formula One as it adds more races, and of course, as we said last year, it's adding more teams as well. So exciting times to be part of the Formula One world. Our sponsors this week again are Phenology, Give, Send, Go, Cloud Hub, and I've forgotten the last one. Yes, L American. Sorry about that, folks. I'm sure that L American will give them an extra bit of a push so that they don't forget, or so they don't get mad at us for forgetting. But as you can obviously see, I'm a little bit out of practice doing this, but I'm sure by the time this podcast is over and we get into next weekend, I'll be fine again. So anyway, so let's go back over those sponsors one more time. It's Phenology, L American, Give, Send, Go, and Cloud Hub, and we thank them for the continued sponsorship. This week our history is going to be on Dan Gurney, who was an American race car driver in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and actually after he officially retired in 1970, but he did do some racing after that, not a lot, the odd race here and there, but he did remain involved in auto racing, having owned and managed and run the All-American Racers Company actually he founded it in 1964, and of course it's still going today. Dan was born on April the 13th, 1931, and he died on January the 14th, 2018. So he had a nice long life, especially for being a race car driver in the 60s especially, and he was very much involved with motor racing his entire life. He was 86 years old when he passed on. So a great long life and a very successful life. He raced in sports car racing, NASCAR racing, Formula One, and of course Indy 500. He also partook in the Le Mans 24-hour race. As part of sports car racing, he did the Le Mans, the Sebring, and the Daytona, which are the two 24-hour races, and Sebring is 12-hour race. He partook in a number of Formula One races, and what's interesting was he was a big guy for a Formula One race car driver. You're going to see a couple of pictures here coming up, and you'll notice that in the pictures his head is way above even the roll bar that's behind him, and that's because he was 6'4". If you look at most of your Formula One drivers, most of them are under 5'6", say 5'5". A bunch of small guys, you need them to be small, nimble, quick, and strong. You do get some tall ones. George Russell's quite tall, and so is Max Verstappen. But on the whole, most of them are shorter than me, and I'm 5'7". So he always said that this actually was a bit of a drawback for him, because at 6'4" he was not only very tall, but of course quite heavy, and weight is what it's all about when you're trying to get these cars around the track very fast and maximize fuel consumption and stuff like that. So on some of the cars, they obviously for all the cars, race cars, they're all designed to fit around the driver. But as an example, in the Le Mans car that he drove, they had a little bubble put in the roof so that he could fit his helmet in there, because he was actually quite a little bit too tall to fit in there. So what's interesting is for each Formula One team that he ran with, and for the most part he did drive for Ferrari, he drove for Jack Brabham, for Brabham Motors, he drove for Porsche. Porsche was only in Formula One for 1 year, 2 years, maybe 2 years, and then they decided it was much too expensive to keep going, and of course the All-American Racers Company, which was a joint venture in the beginning between Dan Gurney and Carroll Shelby. They actually put their heads together a lot. Strangely enough, most of the engines that they received came from a British company, so they actually drove under the racing name Anglo-American Racers because of the British component that was there. But he was very forceful in saying that while they did get the engines from the UK, the chassis and the other components of the car were all American made. Although he did say that in the very first car that they did, the engine was British, the chassis was American Racers made, but the transmission, rear axle, suspension and everything was from a Ferrari. So quite a very interesting makeup there. The other interesting thing about him was that he's the only guy that podiumed when for the first race of each Formula One team that he drove for at the beginning of the season, which was only 3. He only drove 4 races for Ferrari. He started kind of mid-season and started 4 races for them. He thought they were much too, I would say, disciplined, maybe, or much too. The management style was not flexible at all, and he did not enjoy being there or anything. So he was quick to get out of the Ferrari, although Ferrari wanted him really bad. He had one serious accident when he was driving Formula One, and that he broke his arm and he killed a spectator. As you'll see in the pictures as we put up there with the Formula One, you'll see there's some pictures of Monaco. during the Monaco Grand Prix. There's nobody watching. Can you believe that? Nobody watching the Monaco Grand Prix. That was back, I think the picture's from 1967. So as I said, in the early days when I used to go to the Formula One races in the 60s and everything, you could walk anywhere, you could do anything, you could go to the pits, nobody cared. Trying to even buy a ticket to that Grand Prix today is going to cost you probably in the region of $300 to $600 to get a ticket to be able to watch the Monaco Grand Prix, or to watch any Grand Prix. The one right here in Austin is about $250 to get in and watch it. And you'll notice there's no barriers. They're going around the corner. There's no safety barriers. There's nothing. You just got 3 or 4 cars there that you can see in the picture taking this turn just as if there were a street car driving around there, only the Formula One cars. Very, very interesting. So Gurney's career in Formula One lasted till about 1970. He also drove Indy cars for much of that time. I think his Indy career lasted from about 64 through 72, I believe. And he was kind of very, I would say, quite successful in Indy. The last 3 Indy races that he ran, he came in second in each of those races. A couple of races before that, he would have come in first, were it not for mechanical issues. In fact, on one of, I think it was 1964-65, he was driving the Indy with the British-made V12 engine, and when he got up to high speed, the engine would misfire. So it's hard to maintain lots of speed and everything with an engine that's misfiring. But he did still manage in that race to come in like 7th, I think it was. So he was what you would call a manufacturer's driver, right? He was very gentle on the cars. The other guy that had a good reputation for that, of course, is Mario Andretti. After he had that accident where the pedestrian was killed, he blamed the braking system on the car for that accident. And after that, he developed a braking style to where a lot of his sports car racing drivers do it now. One of the problems you have with the brakes on these cars is they get very hot, very fast. And they use a different brake fluid now, but back in the days, they were using the same brake fluid as what you would put into a passenger car. And when that brake fluid gets hot, then the brakes become unresponsive. The pedal will just go straight to the floor, like you have no brakes. So he started the brake type pattern of braking, where you brake. You brake hard on, ease off, hard on, ease off, hard on, ease off. 1, it helps the brakes last a lot longer, but 2, the more important thing is it stops that heat buildup that was very prevalent back then. Remember, back then they didn't have air-cooled discs or anything like that, so it was. In fact, disc brakes had only just come along in the 60s, so it was really a tough time to be a race car driver, and you really had to feel it out. One of the things you'll notice about Dan Gurney, his era in driving, is that he drove everything. In fact, he was the first of 3 drivers to drive Formula One, IndyCar, NASCAR. There's only 2 other drivers done that, and that is Mario Andretti, who, of course, we're all familiar with, and one that a lot of you may not be familiar with, the name Juan Montoya. Juan Montoya won Indy a couple of times. I think actually he drove it again a couple of years ago, or maybe it was last year. But he went over and he was in the Formula One circuit. He was okay. He wasn't really, he didn't, I think he only had a couple of podium finishes. But like a lot of the guys, he ended up in NASCAR for a while. And in fact, as we'll see, we'll put some pictures in here of Dan in his IndyCar. And incidentally, in these IndyCar pictures, you will see how big he is. And you'll see the size of his frame inside that car compared to a lot of the other drivers. So he after his career, well, actually, before his career in IndyCar ended, he started driving in NASCAR, and he was quite successful in NASCAR. He won quite a few races, and he started. The cars that he put into NASCAR were cars that he was building himself. The Plymouth and Toyota and some of these other cars that you could see pictures of him in, and at the time that he was driving, were all cars that were made by the All American Racers company, and which, by the way, if you go to their website, which must give credits here, the pictures that you are seeing right here are from the All American Racers website, and so we thank them for the ability to download their pictures and put them on. That anyway, back to the Indy cars. The other problem with being big, of course, is that the Indy cars are very close to the same design and everything as the Formula One cars. The chassis is different and the suspension's different, but most of the other stuff is the same. And so again, it's hard to be a big guy and drive those cars. So he did go in and start his NASCAR racing after he retired from Formula One, but was still racing for the IndyCar series. And the other thing that you need to be aware of, I guess, is that he teamed with AJ Foyt, and you'll see the pictures here coming up. You can see one, he's sitting on the hood of the car after they win the race, and the other is just a picture of a nice and good a color picture. And this is from the same year. If you ever saw that movie, Ford versus Ferrari, this is the same year that Ken Miles was cheated out of winning the Le Mans 24-hour race. And in fact, Dan Gurney and AJ Foyt end up winning it. And it was because of the way that when the cars, if you ever get to see, and maybe I'll go see if I can find a picture where the drivers used to line up on the other side of the track, and when the buzzer went off to go to time to start the race, the drivers would run across the track, jump in their cars, strap themselves in, and off they would go. Well, the position of where they were on the track was of course done through times. Whoever made the fastest lap then got moved to the front of the pack. So the stewards decided that although the two Fords crossed the start-finish line at exactly the same time, in fact Ken Miles and his partner, it may have been Carroll Shelby, no, I don't think it was Carroll Shelby. I can't remember who Ken Miles' partner was, but Ken Miles was told that he still had another, 40 feet or 40 yards or whatever still to drive. And so the win was given to Dan Gurney and to AJ Foyt. So a very, very hard lines, tough luck for Ken Miles, who would die in one of Carroll Shelby's cars during a practice session, during setup, before. In fact, they weren't even at a race. They were just at the Cobra Motors test tracks. So I should say Carroll Shelby's test track. That's where all the Cobras were made. But nevertheless, so Ken Miles never did get to quote unquote win, although he could have finished light years. He was a whole lap and a half up on second place car, which was Dan Gurney and AJ Foyt, when he was given team orders to let them catch up and to come across the finish line together. So anyway, very interesting life for Ken Miles. I'm sorry, for Dan Gurney. I was still feeling sorry for Ken Miles there. Anyway, an interesting life for Dan Gurney, a very successful racer. Never really won any championships to speak of, other than he did win, I think, a NASCAR championship one time. But he was one of those drivers that was always the bridesmaid but never the bride. Obviously, he won a lot of races. I think he won 82 races in his life. So he was, a very good driver and very successful. An interesting tidbit of information that I found when I was looking up his life, when he was at the funeral of Jim Clark. Jim Clark's dad came up and told Dan Gurney that Jim Clark only feared one driver out there on the racetrack in his time that they were racing against each other, and that was Dan Gurney. And remember, at that same time that Dan Gurney was driving, you had Jackie Stewart, you had Graham Hill, you had Bruce McLaren. I mean, you had some really, really good Formula One drivers. So that's going to end this session. This session has been brought to you by El American. Folks, there's lots of places you can choose to go get your news, but there's one place you should go to get your news where you know that the news station is reporting facts and only facts and not opinions. And wouldn't it be nice to get your news in 2 languages? For all you Spanish-speaking Formula One fans out there, you can tune in El American, and so while you're older like me and you just speak Spanish, you can listen to the news, and your kids can and grandkids can tune in and listen to the same news in English. That's right, El American broadcasts in both English and Spanish. So please go to elamerican.com for all of your newscasts. Okay, welcome back to the Formula One News Hour. In this segment, what we're really going to do, it's going to be short, it's probably going to be 5 or 10 minutes, but we're going to look at what has happened in the off-season to the Formula One cars and the teams, and what's kind of newsy, what's not newsy, and things like that. And you're going to see me turning to my laptop here to get it. I've kind of pulled up the pages already, but things off the top of my head. The first thing, and maybe funniest, but maybe a little tragic, is that Lance Stroll will not be partaking in the first race of the season. And the reason for that is Lance Stroll fell off his bike. That's right, he fell off his bicycle. And he sustained an injury as such to where he hasn't practiced all of this week gone by, which has, by the way, been important for the teams. This last week is when they've really been setting their cars up and really seeing who's got the fastest cars and stuff like that. So Lance has had to sit that out, and there was talk that Sebastian Vettel was going to take that seat, but that's not true. And if you give me a moment, I will tell you who it is. It is a young driver by the name of Dragovic. So Mr. Drugovich is going to be filling in for Lance Stroll for the first race of the season. Why they didn't want to use Sebastian Vettel, I don't know, because if you remember when he retired last year, he was driving for Aston Martin. So interesting things. The other thing that's interesting is it still looks like Red Bull is the car to beat. It is, how would you say, still the fastest car on the track. Yesterday, in yesterday's speed time trial things, it was actually Sergio Perez that came out with the fastest time. But for the most part of the week, it has been, of course, come on, John, spit his name out. The other Red Bull driver, Max Verstappen. It has been Max Verstappen that has dominated the speed. Ferrari have a really strange little problem with their car. When it gets up to speed, and by the way, they've got more speed out of that car this year. Let's just hope that, well, here's the other news. They have relegated the last year's strategist to the factory offices this year. So they have a new strategist, so we'll see how that person makes out. It's a guy, they've given his name, but I haven't remembered it, and it's not up here on the laptop. But so Ferrari's got a new strategist, so we'll see how they do. And talking to strategists, Hannah Smits was voted Engineer of the Year in Formula One for last year, for her job as the strategist for the Red Bull team. I think that was a well-deserved award. I would have to say quite a very, very clever, or maybe a better adjective is brilliant, mind there working for Red Bull. I'm sure that they're making it more than worth her while to remain with the team. The other kind of news was the other thing I brought up about Ferrari. When Ferrari's car gets up to speed, there's something that gets a little dimple, a little dent in the front nose of the car, and they're trying to figure out why. Or they were. I read that I think Wednesday or Thursday this week, so I haven't read to see if they figured out what that was. But I'm sure they'll figure that out, because that's bound to slow them down, even if it's just 1 or 2 hundredths of a second per lap. That's not going to be not going to help the aerodynamics of the car at all. Talking of aerodynamics, Mercedes have been having little problems with the very front wings buckling on their little air vents that you see on the very front wing pieces of the car. Mercedes have had that, and they've had strangely exposed wires right behind the steering wheel. They were saying that it was relaying information back, and that they wouldn't be there on race day. Mercedes may still have a porpoising problem. Some of the photographers for the like TV cameras have picked up their heads bobbling like this when they're going down the straightaway, and they shouldn't be doing that. That bobbing is kind of what happens when the car starts porpoising. So they may have a porpoising issue. They have got more speed out of the car, which is kind of good and interesting in a way. So both Mercedes and Ferrari apparently have managed to get more speed out of their car, but they haven't kept pace with Red Bull. So let's see. I'm going to turn here in a minute, and I'm going to see what else I can pull up here. Let's see. Christian Horner has come up with his thing on who's the most improved car for this year. That team. Let's see who he's picked. He's actually picking Ferrari. That's very interesting, because really Ferrari, I don't think had a lot in the way of speed they needed to improve. Their whole thing was they needed a strategist, somebody that could really pull the team through and win, continue to win. Because if you remember at the beginning of last season, Ferrari had a really good start. I think they won the first 2 or 3 races or 4 races, but after that it was just a disaster. And it was not just bad strategy. Leclerc was quite, I would say, he wasn't consistent enough, and Carlos Sainz, just while he wasn't consistent, he also had some bad luck. But I think you take those 3 things: the drivers weren't performing at the level they should be, and the strategist was not doing what he should do. Now on to some interesting news. The guy that runs McLaren went over and visited the guy that runs Red Bull. Is there going to be a teaming? As you know, Ford have joined Red Bull. I think that's because of the announcement of the team that General Motors is teamed with Andretti, with Michael Andretti, and I think Ford wanted to get their name back there into Formula One, so they may be thinking about teaming up. The only thing I could think that they could team up with is on the engines. Now last year I met the head of Red Bull's engine development team. I have not asked him yet, because I don't think it would be appropriate. We kind of became friends, and I don't think it's appropriate to try and get insider information out of him. But if I can find another way to find out, then I will. I just can't ethically. I can't go and do that. So if I can find out another way to see what involvement Ford is having in Red Bull, then I'll certainly pass that on. But it's interesting to see McLaren over there visiting him. And the only thing that I could think they would be talking about is engines, because McLaren have built themselves a 20 million pound chassis development center that's away from their main headquarters. So they're very intent on building their own chassis. So it can only be that they are going to be talking about engines, I would imagine. It could be, of course, it also could be battery packs for the they're all hybrid now, so they use that electrical power to come out of the corners and stuff. So could be battery packs, but anyway, even if you're talking battery packs, engine, power, they call them power plants now, not engines and stuff. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see. So let's take another look and see what other kind of news we've got. Well, what we should do also is thank another one of our sponsors, and I think we'll go ahead and thank Moms for Liberty. I think you've heard me if you've been watching and listening to my podcast. Moms for Liberty is a conservative parent organization. Moms, they have I forget what 81 chapters throughout the nation. It's going to be more than that now because they had 81 when we were first talking to them. But they've got a lot of chapters throughout the country. And what they do is they promote parents getting involved with their kids' education, and they get parents involved and get them to the school boards, get them on the school boards, so we can get away from all of this, teaching our children about LGBT stuff and critical race theory and all that kind of stuff, and get them back at the schools back to teaching what they should be teaching, which is mathematics, English, science, and languages. Yeah, I'm a big proponent. Unfortunately here in the States, they've got this, English language as a first language type thing, which is, I guess, okay, but I just really think that all the schools should be teaching 2 other languages other than English in their classes. I think Spanish, for one, is a must here in the United States, because we've got the whole Latin American community below us, and to the west of us in Mexico, and then we've got all South America and all, which are all Spanish speaking, with the exception of Brazil, which speaks Portuguese. And Suriname, which speaks Dutch. But let's just say there's a lot more Spanish speaking people down there than there are any other language. So I think we really need to be speaking at least Spanish and English, and then just for good measure, speak another language. If you want to make it easy, learn Italian or Portuguese. Those are 2 good close ones to Spanish. But most Portuguese people can understand Spanish. They can't speak it, but they can understand it. So that would be a good crossover there. Italian would be a fairly easy one. But, add in some different ones. Add in Russian and Chinese and stuff like that, because business is done all over the world now. So anyway, that's a long commercial for Moms for Liberty. So anyway, if you would love to support them, if you're out there and you want to create a chapter, then please go to momsforliberty.org. That is momsforliberty.org. And I'm going to take a pause right here and see if there's any other interesting news to bring you up to date on. Okay, so I'm back. So the only other interesting news is that this young Australian driver, Osteri, he is being compared to Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. This is going to be, he hasn't driven a Formula One race yet. He's been a test driver, of course. He was driving for AlphaTauri part-time last year, but he's never driven in a Formula One race. He has driven in the speed time trials and stuff like that before the races, but he's done quite a few laps in a Formula One car. But that's a very tough reputation to follow there, to be compared to those 2 guys. But we'll see. He's really the reason that Danny Ricciardo, a fellow Australian, does not have a ride this year. One of the things I was doing was reading up about Ricciardo's relationship inside the McLaren team, and he was well liked. Everybody had a really good relationship with him, and so it was really just the fact that he's 32, 33, and the number 1 driver is only 23 or 24 now, and so he's 19, I think. So I think McLaren just really wanted to bring him on now and get him really in tune for the time as the drivers age through. Then he'll be ready. But very interesting. So until next week, again we'll thank our sponsors: Thenology, L American, Moms for Liberty, and Cloud Hub. Thank you very much. And of course, we want to thank our producer, all things technical guru. Wait a minute, I've forgotten your name, Andre. No, I haven't. I've remembered it. I want to thank Andre Kuhn for all of the great work that he does in making this look like it's a flawless podcast. Although I think he might have to leave in one or two of my little oopses this week. But again, thank you, Andre Kuhn, for all the great work you do. And we will see you next Saturday. Well, the podcast get put up on a Sunday, but I will be doing the speed time trials as they happen. I'll be recording them live as they go through on Friday and Saturday. 2 on Friday and then the 1 on Saturday for pole position. And then we will be here live on Sunday for race day. So until next week, thank you, and thank you for taking the time to tune in this podcast. I'm Jonathan Steele, your host.